Thank you for joining us. This is Live with Miami's Community News, and I'm Michael Miller. Special guest today is Ken Russell. And Ken, you want to be the City of Miami mayor. Big job.
It is. Thanks for having me, Mike.
What? You went from commissioner over there? You were there for how many years? 4 years?
I was elected twice, so almost.
That was a big deal. The first time was by accident, second time's on purpose. That's what voters say. So here you are, and you ran for Congress, right?
I did.
Good move. Today, you want to be the mayor of Miami. Why?
Well, the city of Miami is worse than ever. I was there for 2 terms, and I was in the middle of the mess that was there. I was still able to pass most of Miami's good environmental legislation and good government legislation. I've seen them undoing even the legislation I passed since then. They're trying to pass lifetime pensions for themselves and eliminate tree protections, eliminate recycling, go back on public benefits. And I just realized I can make a difference from the inside, and I've had enough.
So one of the things that we as voters and residents of Miami-Dade County, we frequently see where what we see the first time out, which we agreed to, ultimately gets changed. And then we get stiffed.
Yes.
We see it all the
Bait
time.
and switch.
And we see it frequently with builders. And we saw it on a couple of developments, which I'm not going to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
And the voters feel betrayed. And because it's our representatives, the elected officials, that are stiffing us. So let's talk about how you're going to try to stop that from happening.
Well, that's one of my biggest pet peeves. And when ballot language is unclear, when something's agreed and then gone back on, there's a systemic problem in the city of Miami specifically that keeps allowing the same people to come in on a revolving door of elections, so that folks that were there when I was 7 years old are still sitting there today. And if it's not them, it's their brother, their father, or, you know, it's got to stop. And it starts with better choices, but we need an entire bomb thrown in on our charter, and we need to start from scratch.
I think years and years ago, City of Miami had a better reputation. We're talking about the government, not our
Which year are you talking about?
What?
Which year are you talking?
Long time ago.
Okay.
Right. But recently, we feel sort of betrayed, including some of the problems that the mayors had. There was very public information. And then we continued to distrust. So the question at hand is, why should voters trust you?
Well, I have been in there for 2 terms without ethical and legal problems, whereas other commissioners there have now racked up tens of millions of dollars in legal fees for their bad ethical behavior and tens of millions of dollars in settlements that we as taxpayers are paying for. I've actually testified against the city and commissioners since I left office. So I'm actually going in on a platform of reform of corruption, not to play games and play ball with them.
Right. So what are some of the biggest issues facing the residents of Miami?
Well, you've got 2 layers. One is all the substantive issues that we care about, whether it's traffic, affordable housing, homelessness issues, green space, and the environment. But overarching of all that, it must be under an umbrella of good government, and we don't have that at this point. So
we know there's been a big stink about Coconut Grove. It's getting better. It's improving. People still feel like they're being shoved out. But that's a common issue when an area gets really bad and then developers come in, God bless them, all right, to build something beautiful. Are there some areas in the city of Miami that really should be preserved?
100%. I'm a big believer in historic preservation. Our city is young enough that we need to hold on to what we can, whether it's the Coconut Grove Playhouse or the Olympia Theater, or even historic structures within the community. And even beyond that, our natural infrastructure, our canopy of trees. These are things we should be cherishing and protecting. But you don't do it in a way that actually kills business or stifles growth, because normal, natural market growth is okay. It's when the government is accelerating it through upzoning and not giving us the infrastructure to keep up with that growth. That's when you feel overdevelopment.
Let's talk about trees, and because that's one of the things that we all see. We drive down the street, we say, "Isn't this beautiful?" There's some issues going on with your tree ordinance.
Yes.
Explain that to me.
Well, I actually wrote the existing tree ordinance that we have that protects trees. It's meant to protect residents who need to do tree mitigations if they're building a pool or expanding their home, but really hold the feet to the fire of developers who would love more than anything just to clear cut those lots. Because unfortunately, the value of our homes on the retail market is not about the canopy, it's about the built out square footage. And the cubes you see are not necessarily a design function, but rather a mathematical equation of setbacks. That's how you get a cube. And the only way you get there is by killing trees. So my ordinance protected that. Unfortunately, the bureaucracy in the city makes it very hard to pull one of these permits, even as a well-intended citizen. And so
Pull a permit.
a permit to relocate or remove a tree if you had to for some reason. And so that the knee-jerk reaction to that is, well, let's get rid of the permitting altogether. Let's let anyone kill any tree we want whatsoever. And that's not the solution, but that's what they're planning to do right now.
They're planning to do that.
Yes, a reform to the ordinance that basically eliminates the permitting process of tree removals.
A lot of trees will be cut up.
You would see a difference within a year. You would see a complete change from Google Earth on what Coconut Grove specifically or Morningside look like.
In the area around our office, just west of here, for years I've been saying, this is the next Coconut Grove, Coconut Grove. And I see what's happening here. And I see that's in.
Do they mean that as a compliment?
Yeah, they do, actually. Oh. All right. Yes. All right. But thanks for clarifying that.
There's 2 points there, yeah, 2 sides.
But one thing, there are a lot of trees.
Yeah.
A lot of trees.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really great. You drive down the street that's what makes it, that it didn't get there by accident. All right, so what are some of the other issues facing on voters?
Oh my goodness! So you've got storm surge and sea level rise. How do we deal with storms?
Did you read my notes, by the way?
No, but this is what everybody knows.
Of course.
And everybody should know. These massive infrastructural challenges we have. So when I was in office, I was able to pass the Miami Forever bond. Our mayor even voted against it when it was coming on the dais. But really that created $400 million without raising taxes for us to tackle storm surge and sea level rise and even affordable housing, all the resilience issues of the city. But they're not deploying it fast enough or properly. So that needs to be tapped into. We really need to make sure we're ready for the next big storm or the next big rains.
So frequently we've all gotten accustomed to Brickell Avenue area flooding. It's just like, okay, big rain, this is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to just get desensitized to it?
No, we've got to fix it because it is very possible. Other cities have done it. The technology exists. The funding is now there. We just need to do it. But you can't go. There's also an Army Corps plan you may remember from a couple of years ago, build a 20-foot wall around downtown. That's also not the right solution. So there are solutions that are out there, green-gray infrastructure we call it, that is a blend of the concrete walls that you need, but also natural infrastructure to help with drainage, and that's what we need to do.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the price of housing. I know it's a common conversation, but you're the guy, all right? What can the city actually do, if anything, to try to control the cost of housing?
So change the framing of that phrase. We're not trying to control the cost of housing, right? That implies putting a shackle on the market that is organically growing. People want to be here. They're going to move here. We have everything going on. It's such a desirable place. But to believe also that organically that growth is going to create enough supply for the demand that the prices will stay down is also a fantasy. So what you have to do as a government is to put a finger on the scale of what's available for the community that you do want to make sure has a chance to still live here. Because the class of folks that actually build this city and maintain it on a day-to-day basis, if they can't live here and they've got to commute there's really no place left. Every place is getting unaffordable. But if you don't create housing for this workforce, you're actually going to see a deterioration of quality of life for everyone in the city. And so it's incumbent upon the government to help create incentives and zoning plans for those developers to be interested in creating that kind of housing. They're not going to do it on their own.
And it's going to do that because it's going to be, I'll use the phrase, a little bit more liberalized so that they will invest over there so that people are going to be a little bit happier. What is that? What are some of those variances that might be included in that?
Well, so the state and the county are trying to do a couple things. You've heard of Live Local Act and you've heard of RTZ. So and this is the sledgehammer approach, really, where RTZ, for example, that the county is forcing.
What does that stand for?
So this is rapid transit zoning. The county found a loophole because of the need for affordable housing that anywhere within a certain distance of permanent transit, the Metro Rail, the Metro Mover, you can pretty much build anything you want. And what that does, however, is tramples all over local zoning so that a 20-story tower could be right next to a single-family home. And that's not how our zoning codes are developed. So there's something in between that and doing nothing which means that you can create something that blends with neighborhoods, that fits the character of the area, but provides the units needed in the range that's truly attainable.
So we just wrote a piece about the turnpike from here south, and that all the people that are coming from the south coming to the north have to sit through that traffic. So the issue came up is, can there be enough jobs offered in an area so that people won't have to drive? So tell us about that within the city of Miami.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought you meant in down south if there were jobs there for them to stay.
But I was just trying to draw that analogy where people said, can they really do that? Put enough jobs south to slow down the traffic. But in the city of Miami, what I'm sort of hearing is you can work here and you can live here.
That's the goal. I mean, you want to have that 15-minute city, so there's a park within walking distance of you, as well as your job, as well as the restaurant and the market. That's the dream. The less we can rely on cars, the better. So I am a big believer in healthy public transit, which we do not have. Unfortunately, the city doesn't carry a large role in that field. We have our trolley system, but really we rely on the county to provide the transit.
I went to a brunch on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Downtown is right off of Brickell. And I was walking across the streets. I realized how many types of mobility were going on right in front of me. You had people that were walking. You had some people who were jogging. You had some parents with their kids. You had the little skateboards. You had Uber all over. And there were a couple other ways. But that's what this has come to, which is you have to figure out how you're going to get around and manage yourself within that. So we sat right there on the curbside and watching all of it. And it was wonderful.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
You get there one of two ways. One, by design, if there's the will of the policymakers to push toward that, which there usually isn't because our default is cars. And the other is to hit rock bottom, to where traffic gets so bad that people must find other solutions. And we're pretty much there too.
So one of the things we recognize, rock bottom is not a bad thing because we know what's happening next. It's going to get better.
Yes,
right?
Unfortunately, you hit rock bottom and then you find there's another bottom below that. So we need to take action proactively to improve the situation.
So speaking of hit rock bottom and more, what about the Miami Marina? Is that what it's called? On Key Biscayne, that facility? What is it?
Oh, the Marine Stadium.
Marine Stadium, yeah.
Sure. It's been an unfortunate white elephant that hasn't been restored and brought back to life. It's such an amazing facility. At the very least, it hasn't fallen apart into the sea. But the actions are being taken. We passed a special obligation bond when I was there to fund the restoration of it. But then some commissioners got in that wanted to make a San Diego-style marina there instead and kind of stonewalled it. But it's back on track, and they're in the process of finding an operator now who will bring live shows back to a fully operational stadium.
I remember, I think I was in high school. I hate to say it was that long, high school or college, going over there, and it was really neat.
I don't want to tell us which artist you might have seen. Benny Goodman, or was it? Oh, sorry.
Wow.
Okay. Sorry, Michael.
Let's talk about that's okay. Let's talk about Ultrafest. It seems to have smoothed out. Well, let's talk about what that means for Miami.
So Ultra actually is a huge benefit for the hotel industry and the music industry in Miami, and it's a part of downtown's, it's in the DNA of downtown Miami for decades. But when I was there, it had hit a pain point with the residents because when it first got there, we weren't as dense in residential as we are now. And so we had to broker a piece. And it was a painful piece, but we came to it. They have the decibel rules. They have the hourly rules. They have the light rules. And they're following them because they want to stay. They don't want to go to Homestead or elsewhere. And so they've become a good neighbor.
I know one time they went somewhere else for a while. That didn't work out. So fortunately, it's here, and I think you're right. It's just part of the system. When does that come up, by the way?
It's every spring. Yeah, right. I remember because it was the first.
Does that mean it's about to happen, or it just did?
If I missed it, I missed it. I'm not the EDM fan I used to be.
All right, so we know the small businesses are the core of any community. What can the city do to encourage people to open their small businesses in the city of Miami?
Oh, we absolutely should. So one of my favorite jobs I had when I was commissioner, I was also the chairman of the Coconut Grove Business Improvement District. And that you really see the rubber meet the road on decisions you make and investments you have in a community to attract business. So it's not just about creating subsidies, it's about creating walkable sidewalks and access and parking. Livelihood and liveliness and events. You see the Grove now compared to what the Grove was 15, 20 years ago with paper on the windows. It's the most walkable, interesting area, and restaurants are thriving. So it's about creating an ecosystem for those businesses to do well.
We go to brunch breakfast, we usually on the south end where Green Streets is. We sort of hang out over there. My family owns a piece of property over there, so we go over. It's really encouraging to go there and hear people all different ages, and they all know what they're doing. You can look at them; they're deliberately going and walking, so we know that they are accustomed to that, which means they're coming. They've been there many, many times, so it's really pretty good. So if we move a little farther south than Green Streets, south, sort of, we have this old building that used to on the weekends and in the evenings you could go and watch a play. What is happening with the Coconut Grove Playhouse?
The Coconut Grove Playhouse is a very sad situation right now. That it's been in its state for so long that didn't have to be. If the county had just left the air conditioning on and the roof fixed, it would be in as perfect a condition as the day it went shuttered. But they didn't, and the demolition by neglect has actually forced their decision to demolish everything but the facade, the front building at least, which is a shame in my mind. It's one of the very few, it's on the National Historic Register of theaters, and I don't know if that'll remain once they actually demolish the theater, but unfortunately that's the direction the county's going.
So even with the county there, with so many people suing to keep it open, there were people on the other side trying to close it.
Yes, I mean, everyone wants to restore it in their own version. So nobody's trying to knock it down altogether and make it go away. But where they can't agree is on the total preservationists versus the people who want to bring it into the future in a different form.
So what are some neat things that are going to happen within the city of Miami in the next couple of years?
Well, we're seeing this explosion of commerce, business, tech, and finance. It'll be interesting to see what that does to us. If that helps our community or hurts our community is up to, I believe, the government on how it shepherds and creates an infrastructure around that. I mean, housing prices could get out of reach as folks move in from elsewhere with a lot more money that are used to higher housing prices, for example. So we have to watch that carefully and really work together with that business community and the neighborhoods that were already here to make sure we have a good quality of life.
So you brought up an important issue. When people move with a lot of money, prices of houses go up. So if you're living here, you have to compete with that. Then the other thing that's happened is a lot of wealthy people coming into town, they're sending their kids to private schools. There used to be, they wanted more students. Now there's waiting lists.
Yes.
And that's the good part and the bad part of that. So it looks like we're switching over to this metropolis, which we so deserve, all kidding aside. All right. We are known throughout the world. Miami's certainly right up there with some of the best cities, certainly throughout the United States. What would you like to see from an image point for the city to have?
The postcard that everyone thinks we have, that's the aspiration of what we should be. But once people do move here, they see all the flaws of what we are missing, whether it's our transit system or enough park space or good mobility, affordable housing, et cetera. So really, we have the opportunity to become the city people already think we are. And that starts with good government, good governance, and good policy. So I'm very optimistic that if we can right this ship, we can actually be the city that Miami should be.
And along that, you're probably young enough to remember there used to be the postcards from South Beach that have a couple old ladies either sitting on the porch or the girls in the bikinis. And that was the image of South Beach.
Yeah.
So what is the image now of the city of Miami?
Oh, no, Miami is a cultural city. We're probably the most diverse city in the entire country, with more than half of our population coming from another country altogether. I love that we could be the example of healthy immigration to the rest of the country and the world versus demonizing it. And that means that our policymakers, our leaders have to stand behind our community of diversity and encourage it and help it thrive.
Well, we try to do that at community newspapers. We had a speaker recently, elected official, so he was doing it in English. And all of a sudden he broke out in Spanish. I wanted to applaud him for doing that, that he had the guts to do that. I know three-quarters of our audience speak Spanish. Yeah. And it was wonderful. I said, this is Miami, and this is part of what we're about. Let's talk about on the Miami Herald property, which was, I forget on Biscayne, what street that is. All right, huge piece of property owned by now, I think the casino folks.
Sure, the
right? There was a proposed buyer who backed out. Are there any public plans on that right now?
The biggest public plan for that is it's one of the missing teeth in the smile of the Miami Baywalk. There is a 5-mile linear path that one of the last things I did before leaving office was bring it into our park system. So the Miami Baywalk has about 7 or 8 missing pieces left that could connect a 5-mile linear park on the water for everyone in Miami to enjoy, but they have been one of the biggest holdouts in opening their piece. And so even before they develop, they could create a temporary connection there so that you could get from Margaret Pace Park down to all of the downtown amenities in Baywalk. So I just don't see why that can't be prioritized more, and that's something I'd like to do.
Okay. Next, how much of the what do they call it? Underline?
The underline?
Underline. How much that is in the city of Miami?
A great portion. It actually starts right at the Miami River in Brickell. So it goes right up to the edge of downtown, and it connects with that Baywalk. So that 10-mile linear park, which is the underline, going all the way down to Dadeland, could actually connect to the Baywalk and go 5 miles north from there. So imagine that sort of walkability and connectivity. But it goes down all the way through Brickell, Coconut Grove, and once it goes into Coral Gables, South Miami, obviously it's another city.
40 years ago, my father used to run underneath the Metro Rail. And I say, you are crazy. Who would ever do that? Well, guess what?
I'm a believer. I thought the same thing when I first thought, who would want to be in a park next to US 1? But what they've done with it is absolutely amazing, and it's on its way.
And that took vision, years and years ahead, including the new, I think it's 395 that goes over to, it has the big arcs on it near downtown. So they've already been 3 years in the works over there, probably a couple more to go, and probably 5 to 7 years before that. So what projects do you have in your mind that might come to fruition in 3, 4, 5, 6 years?
Well, the one under 395, where the overpass has the large spider attacking Miami, the fountain there, that park actually took a long time. The origin of that was one that I created called Omni Park, right there on the same footprint, under the shadow of the 395 overpass. We created a temporary activation park. It only cost us about $300,000 to do, but we had acres and acres there for that area of Omni and downtown to enjoy. And it was the spark for what has now gotten a $60 million grant from the federal government to create the underdeck, they've called it so far. And so these projects take a long time, but I'm always very optimistic and excited to see them come to fruition.
A couple of years ago, a friend took me down to Overtown, Jackson Soul Food, and they had the sign home of Overtown. It was so inspirational to be there, to be able to have some history there. And when I sat in those orange chairs, like we grew up in they call it mid-century furniture, there, it was very comfortable. And then as I turned around and faced east, the condos are right there. What things can the city do to help it preserve the historic areas?
They absolutely must be. And so that area of Overtown is also under what's called a community redevelopment agency that traps tax dollars in there for 30-year periods. And it can only be spent on, among other things, historic preservation. So it has to do with green space and affordable housing, but historic preservation is one of the big things that fund is spent on. And Christine King, who's the chair of that CRA in Overtown, as well as the commissioner for the area, and Keon Hardiman before her, have done a great job of shepherding that money to make sure it doesn't gentrify an area, but rather brings it up for those who live there now.
So when we go into museums and we look, and we get, it changes the brainwaves. You get this very sedate, like seductive feeling, like this is wonderful. We have a lot of old things in the building here, and I see people, they get in a different space. So I understand that it's important to save some of that stuff, not just for us, all right, but for everybody else that may be in line there to say, this is where all these things started. So even if it's a smaller area, all right, to be able to say, we care enough to do that. Are there some particular buildings that the city would like to declare historic?
Yes, and so this is something, it's complicated too, because historic preservation isn't without controversy as well. Because it can become difficult to renovate or restore your home once it's declared historic. I created in the city of Miami before I left a historic overlay of thematic preservation is what it's called, the Bahamian shotgun homes. There's only 15 of them left in what's now called Little Bahamas of Coconut Grove. That's West Grove area, just off Grand Avenue. What wasn't finished, which I would like to finish coming back in, is creating the provisions for actually truly restoring them and making sure the people that own and live on those spots benefit from it rather than being constrained financially if they were wanting to sell their property or that sort of thing. But to see those homes be preserved, and represent the Bahamian history and culture of our city, who were the signers of our very first charter, is very important to me.
And I think every once in a while, if we can pause and just look at that, because it puts us in a different place and it shows that the city does care.
Yeah, it shouldn't be in a museum. It should be out in our community.
Yes.
Yeah.
So getting back to you running for mayor of the city of Miami, what's the budget over there?
Oh, we've surpassed $1 billion just a few years ago. And so it's funny because the current mayor talks about we have the lowest tax rate ever, but that word rate is very deceptive because the values of land keep going up, and so your taxes do keep going up. So we do have the highest taxes that we've ever had.
Yes.
And there is a lot of misspending in the city. And the number one budget cut that needs to happen is the tens of millions of dollars we spend for legal fees on corrupt commissioners.
That's a lot. Can we put up the Mr. Russell's website address? A lot of money has been spent on that.
Yes.
Many millions and millions.
Tens and tens of millions.
Tens of millions of dollars. So that's really starts with the behavior of the elected officials.
Yes.
So why is it that the elected officials do that stuff, all right, that's risky? If it was their own money, you can count on that wouldn't happen. Because when we have a problem, I want to take care of it immediately rather than to wait a year and run up those big bills.
We don't have the accountability even at the ballot box, and our charter is set up that way. We're the largest city in the country with only 5 commissioners, which is way too much power in too few hands. So one of the big revisions I'd like to see is an expansion of the commission to not only dilute that power, but create better representation for each neighborhood. What that does, though, importantly, is it stops these tiny factions on the dais. When you only have 5, 3 people can rule the roost for good or bad, and they can protect each other from lawsuits and stuff and keep paying these bills.
So at 5 people, what's the population of the city of Miami?
Just under 500,000, yeah.
Right. So how many commissioners in the city of South Miami?
They're at 7, I think, yeah?
Whatever it is, or 5, whatever. It's about the same.
Yes.
And for a town of 10,000, and Pinecrest is a little more.
Oh, no, we should have 9, honestly, if we want true representation and checks and balances on the system. But here's one very important thing. We do not have a strong mayor system. So what is the mayor's true job? In the charter, it says that the mayor, they shall be the executor of the meetings. They shall be the presiding officer of the commission. We've never had a mayor that has sat on that dais and run those meetings, and that's one thing I would do. They delegate to a commissioner chairperson, and I think the mayor should be the chair of the commission as written in the charter.
So but each commissioner and mayor, they still have one vote. But what does the mayor vote?
Well, the mayor doesn't have a vote in ours.
Right. He can veto stuff.
Correct.
That's the only thing.
Correct.
For the most part. And cut ribbons.
Yes. So the soft power of a mayor that does not have a vote and does not set the agenda is really their ability to whip votes on their vision, the things that they care about. They can help introduce legislation and gather the votes. Other commissioners can't do that because of the government in the sunshine law. 2 people that vote on the same thing can't meet out of the sunshine. Yep. But a mayor who doesn't vote can. He can't conduit between them, but he can help influence legislation.
I always looked at that, and there's a word that it's called, but isn't that essentially the same thing?
What's that?
You go and somebody that talk over here and you talk over here.
Yeah.
Isn't there somehow there's a communication that occurs, even if it's not said? Right?
Well, if you are ethical about it, there's a way to do it that does not tie those 2 together. If I said, Commissioner A, well, Commissioner B is voting that way and he'll help you with this thing, absolutely wrong. That's removal from office immediately. But if I care about something and I go to each commissioner and say, hey, can you support this thing? I don't have a vote on it, so that there's no conflict there in stacking votes. But I can whip votes as a leader of the commission. Right.
So a couple of things I want to touch on. You years ago, you were among the top yo-yoers in the world or the country?
Well, since we're in politics now, I have to be honest. It was only 3rd place in the over 30 division in the world.
Well, I don't know. That's pretty good.
I'm going to get fact checked, so I can't say I was a world champion or something like that.
And your dad was known throughout the world.
He was one of the greatest in the world at playing the yo-yo, and he had an early patent on mass producing yo-yos.
And you speak 3 languages?
Not well, but yes. Portuguese, Spanish, Japanese,
Portuguese, Japanese.
And Spanish.
English.
English, yeah.
Yeah, the English is okay. I didn't understand it, but I listened to your interview on some radio station. And the first part I got, which is I'm going to try to speak Spanish. It's not too good, but I'm going to go ahead and do it.
I made the joke to them that I spent the last 3 hours in the car in traffic listening to Duolingo, so I'll do my best.
And then you like to rebuild cars.
That's my therapy. It'd be in the garage at night after a day of work, or and just tinker.
And so the last car was Volvo. How old was that?
It was a 1965 Volvo, and it was my first restoration. I did almost all the work myself. And so I was happy to sell that before it fell apart. Yeah.
Okay. And you have a new one coming up.
So yeah, this would be my dream car. This is an old Jaguar, and I really like old British cars. No electronics or anything in them, no computers, just things you can work on with your hands. And
so do you tell your wife, we're not going to keep this, I'm going to sell it too? And then when it gets close, you go, I think I changed my mind?
She doesn't care as long as I'm happy and in the garage, not bothering her.
Not bothering anybody.
Yeah.
Right. Do your kids work on the cars or do yo-yo?
Yes, my youngest daughter really enjoys helping with the car. So she actually gets a little allowance for helping me polish and paint things, and she helps me put old parts on eBay and stuff like that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So if people want to find out about, can we put the website? Oh, she's reading my mind. All right. So the website address, people can go there. They can find you.
Sure. The campaign just launched on Tuesday. It's kenrussellformayor.com. We already had 30 volunteers sign up. So that's really great. If anyone wants to help with the campaign or just learn about it, please head over there.
That's wonderful. Ken Russell, good luck to you.
Thanks
So much for being here.
The chance, Michael.
Okay. And we're going to look at the red camera and say, folks, thank you for joining us. Remember, take care of yourselves and your family. Have a good day. Bye now.